and said my name is Kyle. I was a little bit surprised to get the email to come speak in front of you all. But it was exciting. This is actually one of my favorite Gospels, so I was really glad to have the opportunity to kind of reflect on it a little bit more. This Gospel has really shaped, I think, the way that I've lived my life. I remember reading it and all of a sudden kind of having my eyes open for the first time that like Jesus really, really cares about the poor, like he means it. And that led me to kind of really boldly respond. Some of you guys know me, have known that I've worked with homeless, addicted, with young kids on the west side of the city. And so as I was reflecting on this, I started to think more kind of high level about the posture that I have in that service. And I think that there's kind of two postures that I can have when I read this gospel, fear and obligation, or compassion and invitation. This reading describes judgment, and I don't know, maybe I'm the only one. I get kind of freaked out when I read about judgment, right? We know that we're saved, we know we're baptized, but when you start to hear about the goats and the sheep getting surprised by what side of the aisle that they're on, it starts to make you think a little bit more critically about how I'm living my life. But the issue is that when I start living out of fear, fear of being a goat on God's left instead of sheep on his right, my response then almost becomes obligation, right? I'm serving because I have to escape God's punishment. I'm realizing that when I serve like this, I can also be more tempted to pride and to comparison, right? Because if I'm just worried about not being punished or worried about losing God's love for me, all of a sudden I really start to feel the need to like prove myself. Like, see God, look how worthy I am. Look how much I'm doing. Don't you love me? Like, isn't it so great, right? And I also noticed that in that sort of desperation to prove myself, I compare myself a lot. And I look at other people, like, I'm doing so much more than that person. I gotta be a sheep, because look at, I'm doing way more than the rest of everybody else. And it doesn't really do a lot of good things in my heart. Whereas, instead of focusing on judgment, I focus on that really key verse, whatever you did for one of the least of the brothers of mine, you did for me. Something much different happens. I've heard it said that it's the devil who stands behind us, driving a whip at our back, but it is Jesus who is before us, inviting us. And the devil drives us, and Jesus draws us. He invites us in. And it's a way different motion that when I'm showing up to serve, it's not because I'm being pushed because I have to, because good God, what if I don't? And then God's going to be mad. But instead, it's this warm invitation of come find me here. This is where I am. And so when I remember this, I'm not just punching a clock or serving others to escape God's punishment or improve myself. I'm humbly responding to an invitation to be with the Lord. Jesus is saying to meet me here in the mouths of the hungry, in the face of the naked and the abandoned, even when we feel like they don't deserve it, right? And when I respond to him with humility and compassion, I stop being concerned with all the extras. What does this mean? What does God think of me? I just know he's here, and I'm with him, and that's enough, and he loves me, and I get to meet him here. And so when we do this, when we serve Jesus, and we're focused on just finding him there, just like we do in the Eucharist, Jesus says, I am there in your midst, in the lowly, and the naked, and the abandoned. My service doesn't just become a thing that I do to check a box. It's not just, oh, my job is ministry, and then I go home and live the rest of my life. Or I go and I've got my volunteer duties that I do. But no, all of a sudden, I am looking for Jesus wherever I go. And we know in this city, one of the things I love the most is you can find Jesus a lot, even when you're just pumping your gas, right? Like, you're trying to go get to dinner downtown, and you're running late. All of a sudden, when folks come up and they're asking for your time, or they're asking for prayer, they're asking for money, it's not a distraction, and it's not just a diversion. This is a time to encounter Christ. Sometimes you really have to squint, I will admit it. It's not always easy to find him there. But he's there, and he's inviting me, and he's inviting all of us to find him. And so in these moments when we have opportunities to serve the least of us, it's an opportunity to see Christ our King, and we can respond with tenderness and mercy and compassion.